My son took $15 million, left me alone in this old house, and swore he'd never look back. But 3 days later, he stumbled through my door in rags, looking like a beggar I didn't recognize. Before I go on, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe. What happened next will shock you. The memory of that night is carved into me as sharply as a blade across wood. The last time I saw Nathan before he left, he wasn't the boy I raised, not even the man I had hoped he'd become. He was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, the kind of suit that didn't belong to a small-town boy from Boulder, Colorado. His hair was slicked back with expensive pomade, giving him that glossy Wall Street sheen, and his smile, oh, that smile, wasn't his mother's gentle smile anymore. It wasn't mine either. It was something else entirely. Cold, sharp, greedy, almost mocking, as if I were nothing more than an old obstacle in his path. He had one arm slung casually around a leather briefcase, and I knew, God help me, I knew what was inside it. $15 million, the sum total of half a lifetime's worth of labor, sweat, and sacrifice. My body remembered the toll long before my mind did. The nights spent hunched over paperwork at the kitchen table, the scars on my hands from construction jobs when money was thin, the early mornings and bitter winters I pushed through just to give him a better future. And now that better future was tucked under his arm, claimed as if it had always been his by right. I stood by the front door, watching as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out the keys to my old Chevy without even glancing at me. He didn't ask. He didn't pause. He just slid them into his palm like they belonged to him. My hand gripped the doorframe, my nails biting into the wood until tiny splinters lodged beneath them. My heart pounded in my chest, not from age, not from weakness, but from something I couldn't quite name. Nathan, I finally managed to croak, though my throat felt like sandpaper. He turned, his brown eyes catching the light of the porch lamp. For just a flicker, I thought I saw the boy he once was, the boy who used to run through the yard with scraped knees and a gap-toothed grin. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a look I'd never seen before. Cold, detached, final. "Dad," he said, and the word felt foreign on his tongue, like he was forcing himself to use it one last time. "Don't wait up. This is my life now. I don't need to answer you anymore." The words hit harder than any fist could, and then he was gone. The taillights of my Chevy glowed against the night for a brief moment, before fading into two tiny red specks, bleeding into the darkness like embers dying in the wind. I stood there long after the sound of the engine had vanished, my chest heavy with silence. Behind me, the living room was dim, the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The light flickered across the mantel where family portraits stood in neat rows, each one a frozen memory of a time that now felt like a cruel lie. Nathan at 10, grinning wide, with 2 front teeth missing, holding up the trout we'd caught at Gross Reservoir, his cheeks sunburned, his hair sticking to his forehead, his mother's laughter echoing behind the camera. Nathan at 16, tall and strong, posing proudly in his football uniform. His mother's hand was on his shoulder in that photo, her face beaming with pride. She was gone not long after that picture, and I raised him alone. I gave him everything. Nathan at 21, fresh out of college, hugging me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. He'd whispered in my ear that he'd make me proud, that Mom would be proud too. I believed him. God forgive me. I believed him. I stared at those pictures that night, the silence of the house pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shift. How could the boy in those photographs, the boy I tucked into bed, the boy I prayed for every night, be the same man who drove off with $15 million of my blood and bone? My knees buckled as I lowered myself into the old recliner. The leather groaned under my weight, as if even it had grown weary of carrying me. My chest burned, not just from age or strain, but from a storm of emotions I couldn't name. Anger sharp enough to cut, grief heavy enough to drown, shame bitter enough to choke. My hand drifted to the side table where an envelope sat, folded and yellowed with time. His mother's handwriting was still clear on the front, her delicate script spelling out Nathan's name. She had left it for him, for the day he would lose his way. She had made me promise not to open it, unless things became truly dire. Unless Nathan was beyond reach. That night, my fingers hovered over it, trembling. I wasn't ready. My heart wasn't ready. I slid the letter back beneath the lamp and pressed my forehead into my palms. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house was an accusation. Every gust of wind through the old windows whispered betrayal. I lay there with my eyes closed, but all I could see was Nathan's smirk, his cold eyes, the snap of the door shutting between us. And yet, life has a way of unraveling quicker than we expect. Because 3 nights later, just as the hour hand slid past midnight, I heard a sound at the door, a weak knock, more like a scrape than a strike. I shuffled to the hallway, heart pounding, and opened it. There he was, Nathan, my son, but not the man who had left in polished shoes and a tailored suit. This was someone else entirely. His clothes were torn, hanging off his frame like rags. His shoes were caked in mud, his hair matted, his skin pale and gaunt. The briefcase was gone. His eyes were bloodshot, hollow, almost animal in their desperation. For one terrible moment, I thought I was staring at a stranger, but then his lips parted, and in a voice so small it could have been carried away by the night wind, he whispered, "Dad, I need help." And in that instant, my world tilted, when Nathan's whisper cut through the cold air. "Dad, I need help." I almost didn't believe my own ears. The house had been so quiet that night that even a moth brushing the window might have startled me. His voice seemed to echo off the wooden walls, trembling in the stillness, fragile and foreign. The clock in the hallway ticked louder than it ever had before, each second stretching into an eternity. I hadn't heard his voice in 3 days, not since the night he'd torn away from me with $15 million and a smirk. But the sound I heard now wasn't the Nathan I remembered. It was hoarse, broken, trembling, like the voice of a boy lost in a storm. I pushed the screen door open, its rusty hinges screeching like an old animal. The weak porch light buzzed above us, flickering against the darkness. Nathan stood there, barely upright. His once polished shoes, the same pair he wore when he strutted out of my house like a king, were now caked with mud, the soles flapping loose. His shirt clung to his chest, buttons missing, stained with sweat and dirt. The sharp navy blue suit that had once made him look like a Wall Street tycoon was shredded and frayed, as though it had been dragged through barbed wire and thorn bushes. His hair, once slick and neat, was wild, matted, dripping with sweat. But it wasn't the clothes or the dirt that struck me hardest. It was his eyes. My God, his eyes. They darted nervously up and down the empty street, flicking to every shadow, every fence post, every swaying branch. He looked like a hunted man. "Nathan?" My own voice felt strange in my throat, raw and unsteady. "What happened to you?" He staggered forward, gripping the porch rail so hard his knuckles went white. His chest rose and fell in jagged bursts. They took everything," he rasped. "The money, the car, even my shoes. I had to walk for miles. Dad, please, let me in." For a moment I froze. His words were pleading, his body broken, but my mind reeled back to 3 nights ago. The sound of his cruel tone, the weight of his final words. "This is my life now. I don't need to answer you anymore." And yet here he was, shaking like a leaf in a storm. His arrogance stripped away, his pride scattered in the dirt. "Please," he begged again, his voice cracking like glass under pressure. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The sound of his desperation pierced me in a way I hadn't expected. My hand clamped around the doorknob so tight I felt the metal bite into my palm. The wind howled through the pines beyond the yard, carrying with it a whistle that almost sounded human, as though the night itself was listening. Somewhere far off, a dog barked twice and then fell silent. The silence told me everything. Nathan wasn't just broke. He was scared, terrified. I stepped aside, the decision weighing heavier than the door itself. "Come in," I muttered, my voice low. Nathan stumbled past me into the living room. He collapsed onto the old couch like a sack of bricks. The springs groaned beneath him, protesting the sudden weight, while he doubled over, clutching his chest as if every breath was a battle. His face glistened with sweat, streaked with dirt, and he groaned, the sound deep and hollow. I remained standing, my arms crossed, looming over him as shadows stretched across the floorboards. My words came sharp, honed by betrayal. 3 days ago, you walked out that door with $15 million, my life's work, and now you're back here, looking like you crawled out of a ditch. Start talking, son. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. He didn't speak right away. Only the faint muffled sound of his sobs filled the room. I hadn't heard him cry in years, not since the night his mother passed away, when he was just a boy, clutching her old scarf and refusing to let go. Finally, in a voice broken by shame, he whispered, "I trusted the wrong people, Dad. They promised me more. They told me I'd double the money overnight, but it was all a lie." His words dripped with guilt, each syllable heavy, and then, like a dagger twisted straight into my chest, he added, "I signed your name, Dad. I dragged your reputation into it, too." For a moment, I didn't hear anything else. My ears rang as though a cannon had gone off inside the house. The ticking of the hallway clock vanished. Even my own heartbeat disappeared under the thunder of his confession. "You what?" The words tore out of me, louder than I'd meant, loud enough to shake the walls. My own voice felt like fire in my throat. He flinched like a child struck by lightning, his eyes wide, terrified. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he cried. "They said they needed a guarantor, someone respectable. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was smarter than them." The sound of him, this once arrogant son of mine, pleading and stammering like a broken child, filled the house with a noise worse than silence. Because now the betrayal wasn't just about the money. No, it was about my name, my honor. Everything I had built, every contract signed, every ounce of respect I had fought for in this town. He had stained it all. My fists clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms, drawing blood. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps as I drew closer, the air between us growing heavy, suffocating. When I finally spoke, my voice dropped into something colder than rage, sharper than hate. "You didn't just steal from me, Nathan. You buried me with you." His head snapped up, and for the first time since he'd returned, I saw true fear in his eyes. Not fear of the men outside, not fear of the streets, but fear of me. Tears streamed down his dirt-streaked cheeks. His lips trembled as he forced the words out. "I know, Dad. I know I destroyed everything. And I'm sorry, but—" His chest heaved, his voice cracked, and his eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. "They're coming. They want more than money now. They want blood." And in that instant, the air inside my house changed. The walls felt thinner. The windows are weaker. Every creak of the beams, every gust of wind outside no longer sounded like nature. They sounded like footsteps drawing closer. The home I had lived in for decades, the one place I thought could weather any storm, suddenly felt like a trap closing in. And somewhere deep in my chest, I knew we weren't alone anymore when Nathan uttered those words. They want blood. A chill crawled down my spine, colder than any Colorado night I'd ever weathered. It was the kind of cold that didn't just live on the skin. It burrowed into the bones, into the marrow, into the soul. I lowered myself into the recliner across from him, the leather groaning beneath me like an old friend, tired of carrying my burdens. My knuckles whitened against the armrests, gripping them as though the chair itself was the only thing anchoring me to reality. Nathan's voice wasn't just dripping panic. It carried a truth that seeped through the walls, through the air, through my very veins. Start from the beginning, I demanded. My tone was steady, though inside me a storm churned violently. Who are they? Nathan swallowed so hard, I saw Adam's apple rise and fall in the dim lamp glow. His lips quivered before the words tumbled out. A man named Victor, he muttered. He runs everything. A syndicate, gambling, laundering, things I didn't even understand at first. He promised he could turn 15 million into 30, maybe even 50, if I handed it over. His voice cracked, his shame raw and unmasked. I thought I was finally going to prove myself, Dad. Prove I wasn't just living in your shadow. My chest constricted. I wanted to interrupt, to shake him, to demand how he could be so blind. But I let him go on. His head hung low, eyes fixed on the worn rug beneath his mud-streaked shoes. The second he had the money, everything changed. The car vanished. The briefcase, gone. His men came, armed, rough. They shoved me into a back room and threw papers in front of me. Contracts, debts. They forced a pen into my hand. They made me sign your name. His shoulders shook. They laughed, Dad. Said you'd pay when I couldn't. The words struck me like a hammer. My ribs tightened, each breath sharp and shallow. My anger boiled like wildfire, licking at every vein. But beneath it, sorrow sat heavy. My boy hadn't just been greedy. He'd been desperate, lost, chasing ghosts he could never catch. Nathan scrubbed his face with his sleeve, leaving streaks of dirt across already hollowed cheeks. His voice broke, small and uneven. I barely got out. They beat me, stripped me of everything, dumped me on the side of the road. I walked here, Dad, hours. My feet are bleeding. And now, his eyes darted to the window, shadows dancing in them. Now I think they'll come for you, too. The room seemed to tilt. My heart hammered so hard I swore he could hear it echo. I turned my gaze to the mantel, to the photographs where his mother's smile still lived, frozen in frames. My eyes lingered on the folded letter I'd guarded all these years, her final words, sealed for the day Nathan might lose his way. My fingers twitched toward it. My soul begged for it, but I couldn't, not yet, not while his confession still burned fresh in the air. Do you realize what you've done? My voice cracked sharper than I intended, slicing through the silence like a blade. Nathan nodded, eyes downcast, tears spilling onto the worn fabric of the couch. I ruined everything. I thought I could build something bigger than what you gave me. But instead, I destroyed us. I leaned back, my lungs aching for air. The betrayal wasn't just money. It wasn't even my name, though that wound cut deep. It was worse. It was the truth staring me in the face. My son didn't know who he was anymore. And then, like lightning splitting the night sky, the hidden truth spilled from his trembling lips. Dad. His whisper was so faint I almost missed it. I didn't just sign your name. I gave them the house, too. If we don't pay, we'll lose everything. They'll take it all. The words ripped me open. This wasn't just timber and drywall. This was her house, the one his mother had filled with laughter and light before illness stole her breath. The one she had painted with her own hands, decorated with curtains she sewed herself. Every nail in these walls, every floorboard that creaked beneath our feet, Each piece of it carried her touch, her memory, and now, because of Nathan's reckless hunger, strangers with guns held it all in their grip. My throat tightened. Heat pricked my eyes. But I forced the tears back, letting rage harden them into steel. My fists trembled against the armrests. You gave them your mother's house. My voice came out low, guttural, almost unrecognizable even to me. Nathan's lips trembled, his face contorting under the weight of his own shame. I thought I could win it back. The words echoed in the room, cruel as any jeer. Win it back. Like this home, this legacy, was just another chip on a table. And in that moment, staring into his tear-streaked face, I didn't see my son anymore. I saw a stranger wearing his skin, the kind of stranger who had opened the gates of hell and invited the devil into my home. The man sitting across from me wore my son's face, but I swear to you, in that moment, he looked like nothing more than a stranger who had broken into my life wearing Nathan's skin. His words clung to me like barbed wire. He hadn't just lost money. He hadn't just signed my name. He gave away his mother's house. Her house. The words seared me from the inside out. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the last place where her laughter lived, where her scent still lingered faintly in the drapes, where her touch had chosen every flower in the garden. And now, my son, my flesh and blood, had traded all that away like it was a poker chip at some backroom table. I couldn't hold it in. My rage erupted like thunder. You sold her memory for a gamble, Nathan. Do you even hear yourself? The walls themselves seemed to recoil at the sound. The glass panes in the windows rattled from the force of my voice. My hands were fists, veins bulging, knuckles pale, the tremor in this wasn't just age, but fury. Nathan jerked back as though my words had struck him across the face. He hunched in the recliner, clutching his ribs where deep purple bruises bloomed under the tatters of his shirt. He tried to meet my eyes, but shame drowned him. I didn't mean for it to happen, Dad, he stammered, his voice thin, quaking. I thought I was doing it for us, for me, for you, for Mom's legacy. I wanted to show the world I wasn't just your spoiled son. I wanted them to see, don't you dare speak her name right now. I snapped, each word slicing the air like broken glass. The silence that followed was suffocating. My chest rose and fell like a storm tide, each breath thick with bitterness. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. The faint hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen buzzed like a distant insect, louder than it had any right to be. Then I heard it. At first it was faint, a murmur carried on the wind. But once my ears tuned to it, the sound dug sharp into me. Voices, low, rough, masculine, too many for comfort. I raised a hand sharply, a command born from decades of authority. Quiet. Nathan froze, his wide eyes locked on mine, his chest still heaving from the weight of my fury. Together we listened. Through the cracked window pane, I caught it. Scraps of conversation floating in with the night air. Check the back. Lights are still on? He's got to be in there. My blood ran cold, and then immediately hot. 3, maybe 4 of them. Not boys, not neighbors. Wolves, circling. Nathan's face drained of color. He grabbed at my sleeve, his grip weak but desperate, his voice a rasping whisper. It's them. They found me. Found him. No, found me. That's what they wanted. My property, my blood, my name. Because my own son had dragged my legacy into their sewer. The humiliation burned worse than the fear. Strangers prowling my land, spitting threats at the walls I built with my own 2 hands. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was desecration. I snapped the lamp off with one swift movement. The room collapsed into darkness. Only the pale wash of moonlight through the blinds painted faint stripes across the floor. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, loud enough that I wondered if the men outside could hear it too. I motioned downward. "Stay low." Nathan slid from the couch to the floor, wincing as his bruises protested. He crawled toward me, his breath shallow, ragged. The footsteps outside pressed closer, crunching against gravel and dry leaves. A silhouette crossed the blinds, tall, broad-shouldered. Then a sharp tap against the window. Metal. The sound of a knife handle, or the cold snout of a gun barrel. A voice followed, deep and dripping with mockery. "Mr. Callahan," it called, loud enough to carry through the walls. "Your boy owes us. We'll take payment tonight." The words slithered under my skin. They spoke my name like it belonged to them, like they already owned it. Nathan's whisper broke me further. "Dad, I'm sorry. I never thought they'd come here." I turned on him, my jaw trembling with fury, my voice tight enough to cut stone. "You didn't just gamble money, Nathan. You gambled with me. My life, my name, my home. And now, because of you, these men think I'm weak enough to bow." His eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. His lips moved, but words faltered before they could escape. He was nothing but a shell, cracked open by his own foolishness. Outside, the wolves circled closer. Their patience wore thin. "Kick it in if you have to." Another voice barked, rough, eager. Nathan flinched so hard he curled into himself, his hands trembling against his knees. "What do we do?" he whimpered. The floorboards creaked beneath me as I rose to my full height. My body ached from the years, from the burdens I had carried. But inside, an old flame roared awake. That fire had built an empire from sweat and stone. That fire had buried men who underestimated me. I narrowed my eyes at the door, feeling the pulse of my heart match the rhythm of the pounding outside. "They want to see who owns this house," I muttered, my voice low, my teeth gritted. "Then let's show them." And as my hand reached for the heavy iron poker resting by the fireplace, the shadows outside shifted, and I knew, before the night was over, blood would be drawn. The pounding on the front door rattled the frame so hard that dust rained down from the old beams above my head. The house, her house, seemed to shudder with every blow. My fists clenched tight at my sides as I stepped toward it, each breath deepening with the weight of what was about to happen. "Stay down," I ordered, my voice sharp as steel, never once turning my eyes from the door. Nathan crouched beside the couch like a wounded animal, trembling so violently I could hear the scrape of his fingernails dragging across the wood floor. The sound cut me to the bone. Fear had hollowed him out, and yet it was his recklessness that had brought these wolves to our doorstep. Outside, a voice bellowed, rough and commanding, carrying the smugness of men who had never once been told no. "Last chance, old man. Open up or we come in and take what's ours." The arrogance of it hit me like a slap. The entitlement. Their tone was poison, mocking, unearned, and vile. All my life I had fought men like this. Parasites who thought power was stolen rather than earned. And now, here they were, claiming they had rights to what was mine, because my son had handed them the illusion of ownership. My jaw locked, teeth grinding as I drew in a breath so deep it rattled in my chest. Slowly, deliberately, I crossed the living room. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a war drum. Each step reminded me I was still alive, and this house was still mine. When I reached the mantel, my eyes lingered on the sealed envelope resting above it. Her letter. My wife's handwriting, frozen in ink. My hand hovered, trembling, aching to reach for it. But not yet. That was for another moment, another war. Instead, I slid open the drawer beneath the mantel and pulled out a thick manila envelope I had hidden there for years. My insurance policy, deeds, contracts, records, the proof of every drop of sweat I had poured into this land. Every nail I hammered, Every dollar I earned the hard way. This envelope was more than paper. It was armor. I tucked it beneath my arm. My other hand reached for the steel crowbar, leaning by the wood stove. Cold, heavy, brutal. Its surface caught the sliver of moonlight filtering in, flashing like a blade. I caught my reflection in it. An old man, yes, but one carved out of stone. From the floor, Nathan's broken whisper reached me. "Dad, what are you doing?" I turned, lowering my eyes to him. My voice came out low, hard, laced with the weight of generations. "I'm protecting what's mine. What was hers? What you tried to throw away." His face crumpled, shame twisting his features, but before he could answer, the door jolted violently under another kick. The wood cracked at the hinges, splinters snapping into the air. "All right," I thundered, my voice booming through the bones of the house. "You want Callahan? You've got him." I ripped the door open with a single pull. The porch light sputtered and buzzed, casting a sickly glow across the three men waiting outside. The first was tall and wiry, his grin sharp, a baseball bat dangling from his hand like an extension of his arm. The second was broad and thick-set, his shirt stretched tight across his chest, a pistol tucked casually into his waistband, as if daring me to look at it. And the third, he was the leader. I could tell instantly, a sharp-eyed man in a leather coat, a cigarette glowing between his lips, his posture calm, calculated. He smirked when he saw me, exhaling smoke that curled into the night. His voice dripped venom. "Mr. Callahan, or should I say, guarantor." My grip tightened on the crowbar until my knuckles ached. "You've got the wrong idea." His sneer deepened. He flicked his cigarette ash onto my porch like he owned the boards beneath his feet. "Your son gave us everything. His signature, your name, this house, it's all ours now." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, holding it up like a banner of victory. Signed, sealed, delivered. Behind me, Nathan's voice cracked with panic. "Dad, I'm sorry. Quiet." I barked without turning, my gaze locked on the men. My son's regret wouldn't protect us tonight. The man with the bat laughed, a hollow, menacing sound. He slapped the bat against his palm, each smack ringing out like a countdown. "Old man, you can either hand it over nice and easy, or we'll collect by force." I lifted the crowbar, its weight settling into my hand like an old friend. The steel glinted under the porch light. My voice cut through the night, sharp, unwavering. "You think a forged signature erases a lifetime of ownership? You think you can walk up to my door and take the last piece of my wife's soul? You don't know who you're dealing with." The men chuckled, but unease clung to the edges of their laughter. They hadn't expected defiance. They hadn't expected the fire still alive in my chest. With my free hand, I lifted the manila envelope, shaking it so the papers inside rustled like a gathering storm. "Every deed, every title, every receipt is in here. You think you own this place. You don't own a damn thing." For the first time, their smiles faltered. The man in the leather coat's eyes flicked toward the envelope, a shadow of doubt crossing his expression. And in that moment, clarity struck me. They weren't just thugs with fists and weapons. They wanted legitimacy. They wanted paperwork to pin their threats on. Without it, they had nothing but smoke and fear. And smoke doesn't stand against stone. But I knew men like them. They wouldn't leave empty-handed. Not tonight. The ladder's smirk vanished. He flicked the half-burned cigarette into the dirt and stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. His eyes narrowed, sharp as razors. "Then we'll take the boy instead." Behind me, Nathan gasped, his voice cracking with terror. "No." The sound of his fear pierced me. My son had betrayed me, shamed me, stripped me bare before the world. But no matter what he had done, no matter the scars he had left on my name, he was still my son. Flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood. My grip on the crowbar tightened until my hand throbbed. My voice came out low, lethal, a vow carved into stone. You'll touch him over my dead body. The night air thickened, every sound amplified, the hum of the porch light, the faint chirp of crickets silenced by tension, Nathan's uneven breaths behind me. And then the leader gave the slightest nod. The man with the bat shifted his stance. The thick-set one's hand hovered near his pistol. The war for my house, my family, was about to begin. The night outside my door felt colder than any winter storm, though the calendar swore it was only early autumn in Boulder. The mountains stood like dark sentinels at the edge of the horizon, their jagged peaks slicing the sky, open as though heaven itself had been torn. The wind threaded through the pines, sharp as knives, carrying with it the smell of rain, iron, metallic, a warning from the earth. A storm was brewing, not just above my roof, but within the walls of my home, within the fragile remnants of my family. The porch creaked beneath the weight of men who did not belong there. I could hear the scrape of their boots against the weathered wood, the impatient shuffle of predators sniffing prey. The one with the bat leaned forward first, his grin stretched wide enough to split his face. His breath, even from a distance, carried the sour rot of stale beer. The thick-set brute at his side shifted restlessly, his hand twitching near the pistol that gleamed faintly beneath the porch light. But it was the man in the leather coat who commanded the air around them. He didn't move much. He didn't need to. The set of his shoulders, the lazy curl of his lips, the way his eyes studied the door as if he already owned what was behind it. This was Victor's man, the kind of man who had sold his soul long ago and found it profitable. Behind me, Nathan whimpered. His fear was a presence of its own, thickening the room like damp air clinging to the lungs. His voice cracked in a whisper that still cut through me like broken glass. "Dad, please, just give them what they want." Those words, my own son's plea to surrender, nearly buckled my knees. Even now, after everything, he did not understand. I spun on him, my voice rumbling low, edged with the fury of a father who had been pushed too far. "You think betrayal can be fixed with surrender? You'd sell your soul again just to buy another breath." His head bowed instantly, as if the weight of my disappointment were too heavy to bear. His tears fell soundlessly onto the wooden floor, dark spots staining the planks his mother once polished with her hands. That sight broke something deep inside me, but it also hardened me further. Weakness would be the death of us. Outside, the man in the coat chuckled. The sound slithered into the house through the cracks in the frame, mockery dressed as amusement. He struck a match, the tiny flame snapping alive and illuminating the ruined map of scars across his face. For a heartbeat, his eyes gleamed like twin coals before the shadows reclaimed him. He dragged deep on his cigarette, then exhaled a stream of smoke that curled into the storm. His voice was smooth, practiced, venom wrapped in velvet. "You've got spirit, old man, but spirit doesn't pay debts." I stepped forward. The crowbar felt heavy but alive in my grip, its iron length humming with the promise of violence. Under my other arm, the envelope of documents pressed firm against my ribs, a reminder of what I still held, of what was still mine. Outside, the wind gusted harder, rattling the rusted mailbox at the end of the drive until it clanged like a broken bell. "You've got nothing," I said, my voice rising above the storm's first warning growl. "No deed, no contract worth the paper it's printed on. This house is mine, always has been, always will be." The thick-set man spat into the dirt, his saliva glistening in the porch light like poison. His jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing. "Then we'll take your blood as collateral." The heavens answered him with violence. Thunder cracked, so close and sharp it rattled the windows in their frames. A jagged bolt of lightning tore the sky open, and for a split second, every line of their faces blazed bright in white brilliance. I saw the hunger in their eyes, the thrill of wolves circling prey, the menace carved into their sneers. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, as if the old house itself was bracing for what was coming. The beams groaned, the walls trembled, and in that sound I could almost hear Martha's voice warning me to hold fast. Nathan crawled toward me on his knees, each movement laced with shame and pain. His hand tugged weakly at my sleeve, his face streaked with tears. "Dad, don't fight them, please. I can't watch them hurt you." I looked down at him. My son, my blood. Once this boy had been the pride of my life, standing tall under Friday night stadium lights, his name cheered by an entire town. Once he had believed he could conquer the world. But now he knelt in front of me, begging me to cower, begging me to lay down the dignity I had spent a lifetime protecting. My jaw tightened. "You may have lost your spine, Nathan, but I haven't lost mine." The words hit him harder than any slap could. I saw it in the twitch of his face, the flinch in his eyes, the rush of shame that turned his skin blotchy red. For a moment, he was my boy again, standing in the glare of disappointment, wanting so badly to be the man I thought he could be. But that moment passed like smoke. The doorframe shook violently. The bat-wielding thug had swung once, and the sound was a cannon in the narrow hall. Splinters rained to the floor like shrapnel. "Enough talk," he snarled, his voice coated with impatience and rage. The storm outside roared in reply. Rain began to fall in fat, heavy drops that spattered against the porch roof. Thunder rolled across the mountains, bouncing from peak to peak, like the drums of war. The man in the coat stepped forward at last, slow, deliberate. His cigarette glowed in the storm like a devil's eye, the ember shrinking with every inhale. He flicked the butt into the dirt, its tiny flame dying beneath the rain. His voice was final, cold as a grave. "Last chance, Callahan. Open the path, or we burn this place to the ground, with both of you inside." The wind howled louder, bending the trees until their trunks groaned. The rain drove sideways now, slashing against the windows with the force of claws. Water trickled through the cracked frame of the living room window, dripping onto the photographs that lined the mantel. I turned my head just in time to see a bead of water slide across Martha's smiling face in the picture. Her image blurred, her memory drowned, as though the storm itself wanted to erase her. That sight struck deeper than any threat these men could make. I raised the crowbar, gripping it with both hands, feeling its weight become my oath. My voice cut through the thunder, sharp and unyielding. "Then you'll have to walk through fire and storm to take what's mine. And I promise you this." I narrowed my eyes, locking them on the shadow in the coat. "You won't walk back out." The storm answered me with another roar, and the house seemed to hold its breath. What came next would decide everything. The night after the storm carried a silence that was anything but peaceful. The air inside the house smelled of wet smoke, old wood, and rain-soaked ash. The porch outside had been rinsed clean by the downpour, but no storm could wash away the images etched in my mind. The sneers of men who thought they owned fear, the way the one in the leather coat flicked his ash as though the whole world were his ashtray, and the glint in his eye when he dared to stand on my property, as if it already belonged to him. I sat alone in the dim kitchen, a single bulb humming above me, its light swaying faintly with each gust of wind that crept through the cracks. The envelope of deeds and documents lay spread across the table like a battlefield map. My fingers traced the edges of paper as if they were lines carved into stone. Outside, the pines whispered against the night sky, conspiring in a language only old men and older houses could understand. Every gust of wind set my teeth on edge, like a warning I could not ignore. From where I sat, I could see Nathan sprawled on the couch, wrapped in a tattered blanket. His chest rose and fell shallowly in the gray wash of early morning light. In that fragile quiet, he looked younger, almost like the boy who once climbed the back fence to hide from thunderstorms, who fell asleep on my shoulder during long drives when the hum of the road lulled him into peace. That boy was buried beneath rubble now, rubble of greed, betrayal, and shame. But for a moment, watching him sleep, I could still see him. My chest tightened. A man's rage, I've learned, can be both a furnace and a lullaby, and sometimes, tragically, it must be both. I turned back to the table. The first task was inventory. Numbers, names, dates, order in the face of chaos. Paperwork had always been my religion, the silent rituals of a man who built his empire with ledgers before bricks. I poured coffee strong enough to peel paint, then sharpened a pencil and began making lists. The forged contract Victor's thug had shoved in my face. The bank records Nathan once faxed in a drunken haze. Signatures that didn't belong to him. Timestamps that didn't line up. Every tick of the kitchen clock became a metronome, counting down the seconds until choice would be stripped from me. I dug out the old phone book. Yellowed, dog-eared, a relic of another era. My finger traced names I hadn't called in years. I dialed numbers that still lived in my memory, etched deeper than family birthdays. An accountant who once pulled me out of a mortgage that could have sunk the business. A judge's assistant I'd helped years back, when Nathan had gotten into trouble after a fight behind the gym. Old debts answered in small, precise coins. A yes here, a favor there. Quiet voices that promised they remembered. But paranoia moved in, wrapping itself around my shoulders like a second skin. I checked the locks twice on every door. I walked the perimeter barefoot in the dark, feeling the earth under my soles like a lie detector. Every creak in the floorboards, every groan in the beams, felt like a language warning me of intruders. I hid the deed envelope in a place no bastard would stumble on by chance. The cavity behind the laundry room's warped floorboard, beneath lint and rust where only vermin had claimed. I wrote copies by hand, tucked one into the family Bible where my mother had underlined Psalms with her delicate handwriting, and sealed another in a safe deposit box entrusted to a friend 2 towns over. Paranoia? No. Necessity. By dawn I was restless. I drove the rusted Chevy, battered but loyal, the same truck Nathan had stolen the keys from 3 days earlier, down to the hardware store at the edge of town. The clerk recognized me, though his eyes avoided mine, as if the lines carved by my years of labor were a mirror he wasn't ready to face. I bought rope, bolts, clamps, and a length of chain. Practical things, necessary things. I told myself they had nothing to do with vengeance, but every clink of metal into the trunk sounded like a chess piece set onto a board I had already decided to play. Back home, I spread paper across the table again, this time sketching, not vengeance in the form of fire or fists, but revenge by erosion. If these men wanted the house, they'd bleed for it. Blood, yes, but reputation most of all. If Victor wanted legitimacy, he'd need more than forged signatures. He'd need law, witnesses, clerks, the facade of decency. I would make those pillars collapse under him. I called Harlan Price, an attorney with a sharp mind and a sharper hatred for cowards. He agreed to meet. Curiosity pricked like a hawk circling a wounded rabbit. I called the county recorder. asked questions that seemed harmless but planted seeds in the soil of bureaucracy. Each confirmation I received was another rope slipped quietly around their necks. Nathan stirred awake by afternoon, groggy, hollow-eyed. Shame hung on him heavier than the blanket draped across his shoulders. I ladled him a bowl of stew and slid it across the table. He ate quietly, each spoonful a man's silent penance. Halfway through, he set the spoon down, staring into the broth as if answers swam there. Finally, his voice broke the stillness. "Dad?" His words were tentative, thin. What are you going to do?" He didn't sound like a son asking his father's plan. He sounded like a penitent kneeling at a throne, terrified of the decree. I picked at the stew, my own appetite long gone. The world felt narrow, like a tunnel carved by years of pressure. "I'm going to make them regret picking my name," I said. My voice was steady. It wasn't poetry. It was a necessity. "They want paper? I'll drown them in paper. Do they want fear? Then I'll give them exposure. The kind that strips a man bare." Nathan's eyes widened. "Expose them? Dad, they'll kill us." His voice cracked under the weight of his terror, the memory of the man with the bat still raw in his mind. "Let them come," I said softly. My hands tightened on the table's edge. "I won't hide, but I won't be prey either." The days that followed blurred into a ritual of vigilance. I asked questions I didn't want answers to, traced names that reeked of rot. Victor was no king. He was only a surface man, an engine feeding on money that wasn't his. Beneath him sprawled a network of fronts, shell companies, laundromats moving more cash than coin, realtors who sold silence as easily as homes. Each paper trail I uncovered was a rope, thin at first, then thicker, woven together until they formed a noose. At night I rehearsed. In the mirror, I practiced the face of a man who could persuade a judge he'd been wronged, and the face of a man who could scare a thug with nothing but the certainty of consequence. Words became blades honed on repetition. The house itself became my accomplice, its groans and creaks learning to cloak my movements, its silence holding the weight of secrets. But the work wasn't just paper and steel. It was flesh and spirit. I began teaching Nathan again, not as a boy, but as a man broken, in need of repair. Small tasks first: grocery runs, water the plants, record the license plates of cars that lingered too long on the street. Each act welded a fragment of spine back into him. He answered phones with a steadier voice, wrote lists without trembling. Little by little, I was carving shame into something useful. Then came the night I found the camera. It was small, no bigger than a child's toy, tucked under the eaves by the garage. At first I thought it was a bird's nest, but the blink of its lens gave it away. Someone had been watching us. That discovery felt more violating than their fists on my door. I plucked it out with gloved hands, slipping it into my jacket, and I'll admit it. A quiet, satisfied glee simmered inside me. To catch the watcher watching, that is a peculiar pleasure. Later I hooked it to a recorder. Grainy footage spilled out, but it was enough. Faces stepped into the light, familiar, hateful. The man with the bat. The thick-set brute, licking his lips like violence was his favorite meal. And finally, Victor himself. Smiling. Confidence. Unaware. The kind of smile only worn by men who had never tasted consequence. I mapped their patterns. Late-night runs. Early morning idles. A cigarette lit at the same corner every Thursday at precisely 2:12 a.m. Routines. Habits, predictable as clockwork, maps, lists, names, evidence. Our arsenal was growing. Every small victory fanned the embers inside me, coaxing them into flame. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a reclamation. Our house, our name, our history. These were not trinkets to be pawned to greedy hands. They were the stubborn embers of a life lived with labor, and I had learned long ago how to turn embers into fire. And so the plan took shape, like frost etching itself across glass, quiet, deliberate. Legal complaints prepared, witnesses gathered, records unearthed, a sting operation waiting to bare its teeth. Nathan watched me, his eyes clearer now, his shoulders less slouched. I fed him the smallest tasks, and with each, he grew steadier. He didn't know it, but I was teaching him how to reclaim his own name, too. Still, there were parts I kept to myself, some secrets a father carries alone. At night, I walked the property, touched the foundation with calloused hands, and whispered to the ghosts of Martha and of the boy Nathan used to be. "We'll get it back," I promised, not because certainty lived in me, but because certainty itself can be a weapon. Beneath my calm burned a rage that hummed like electricity. Sleep grew scarce. Meals tasted of ash. My mind became a workshop of vengeance where every thought was bent towards strategy. I learned to live on small victories. An ally gained, a record found, a bank account frozen. Each one was a bell ringing me forward, and so the stage was set. A lattice of paperwork, witnesses, traps, and quiet fury. They thought themselves untouchable kings, but I was preparing a stage where their thrones would crumble beneath them. Victor loved spectacle. Men like him needed it, so I would give him one. A show not of strength, but of humiliation. A reckoning not in blood, but in the one thing his world could not survive without: respect. The plan fit me like armor. It fit the house. It fit the man I had always been. Builder, protector, destroyer when I must be. Outside, the pines kept whispering. Inside, the house listened, and both seemed to know. Retribution was coming. The world has a way of underestimating old men. They thought they'd broken us when they took the money. They thought dignity was something they could buy and burn in the same night. They were wrong. I had rehearsed that night in my head, like a play. Every cue etched into my mind: the grind of tires on wet gravel, the slam of a car door, the tall one stepping out with his cigarette glowing like a warning light. I imagined the sharp crack of rain on the roof, the camera's hidden shutter blinking silently in the dark. But rehearsals are only shadows of truth. Nothing prepares you for the way your chest tightens when the moment arrives, for the way your fingers tremble not from weakness, but from the sharpened edge of anticipation. Panic, yes, but panic shaped into a blade. The stage was set on a Tuesday evening in late October. The town's lamps glowed with that honey-colored light you only see when fall has nearly surrendered to winter. The air smelled of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, as though the whole world was holding its breath. I wore my old coat, the one my wife used to mend at the elbows. It hung loose on my frame, but it felt like memory itself. Worn, dependable, stitched with her patience. Nathan stood at the window, jittery as a colt. He tugged at the borrowed shirt I'd pressed for him, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. He looked like a man learning to carry shame on his back, without buckling under its weight. "Harlan will be here in 10, I told him. This time, he didn't look away. That alone was progress. Men like Victor thrived on spectacle. They knew how to make fear roar, how to own a room with nothing more than volume and violence. Their power was theater, loud voices, heavy fists, smoky clubs. But paperwork? The paperwork was quiet, patient, and sharp. It sliced when no one expected it, and men like Victor never imagined that their own signatures, their own sloppy routines, would be the rope we'd hang them with. Our plan had two halves: exposure and entrapment. Exposure meant dragging their secrets into the open. Laundering, forged signatures, false invoices. Entrapment meant baiting them with something so tempting they couldn't resist touching it. That touch would be evidence, and evidence was a language the law couldn't ignore. Harlan was my scalpel. Cold, efficient, unsentimental. He agreed to file a complaint, to push for subpoenas, to turn my notes into weapons. I gave him lists, dates, even the twitch of Victor's hand when he lied. A man like Harlan loved puzzles, and Victor was a puzzle with edges sharp enough to draw blood. We began with the laundromat in Grand Junction. Its owner, Rocco, was a wiry man with a twitchy smile and eyes that flickered like faulty bulbs. He liked cash, and he liked to forget the kind of questions Cash usually asked. When I called him by his first name, his smile faltered. I reminded him of a night, long ago, when he had carried groceries for a neighbor after their truck broke down in the snow. That memory softened him. Not every debt is written in ink. Some live in the ledger of conscience. Rocco agreed to speak. The first domino tipped. Next came the ledger, a downtown bar with sticky floors and dim corners. Victor and his men treated it like their throne room. I sat 2 booths away, sipping coffee gone cold, listening the way an old man listens when the only weapon he has left is patience. I memorized their rhythms, the way Victor lowered his voice on the word obligations, the way the tall one's laugh grated like broken glass, the thick-set one licking his lips whenever violence hovered near. I wrote it all down, and Harlan turned those scraps into subpoenas. The bait was ugly but effective. A check, falsified, drawn from a frozen account, hinting at a transfer to an offshore bank. I sealed it in a greasy envelope and tucked it beneath a loose deck board where I knew their eyes would wander. It reeked of contraband, of opportunity. A man like Victor could no more resist it than a moth could resist flame. The day of reckoning came wrapped in rain. The sky hung low, pewter gray, bleeding water across the eaves. Every drip was a countdown. Nathan and I sat in the kitchen, the house breathing around us, our cameras feeding grainy images into the battered recorder humming in the pantry. I could see the road, the mailbox, the dent in the black sedan's bumper. Every sound had a meaning. The creak of the porch, the fox's call beyond the orchard, the low growl of approaching tires. At 3:30 sharp, Victor's car rolled in, engine sighing like a predator settling into the hunt. The tall one stepped out first, cigarette glowing under the rain. The thick-set man followed, his jaw tight, lips wet with that familiar twitch. Victor came last, his smile lazy, his arrogance stitched into every step. To him this was theater. To me, it was a trial. They didn't notice the deputy waiting by the trees, nor Harlan in his raincoat, notepad, hidden like a weapon. They didn't notice the microphone tucked into the hydrangea bush, recording every boast, every threat. Victor strutted up the path. "You thought you could hide?" he mocked, spreading his arms like a showman. "You thought we'd forget what's ours?" His voice was sugar over poison. I stepped onto the porch, rain smacking my coat, the old boards groaning under my boots. My hands didn't tremble. My rage had cured them steadily. "You took my son," I said. "You stole my house. You thought my name was yours to ruin." Victor's grin widened. "You should have known better than to trust the boy with money. He's soft." At that the tall one moved forward, bat under his arm. My hand twitched toward the crowbar behind the door, but I didn't need it. The deputy stepped forward, badge catching a glint of rain. His voice was calm steel. "Step back." Victor sneered when he spotted Harlan. "What's this? A civics lesson?" Harlan's tone was colder than the rain. "We have evidence of financial crimes. Forged signatures, coercion, laundering. You're under investigation." Victor's laughter cracked, short and brittle. The thick-set man's bravado drained from his face. "You can't do this. This is our neighborhood. We have warrants," the deputy said. "Step away from the house." The tall one lunged, like a cornered dog. The deputy caught him mid-motion, cuffs snapping shut. The thick-set man tried to flee, but Nathan, my boy, stepped out and called the license plate into the recorder, his voice steady. For the first time in years, he stood firm. The rain turned everything slow, dreamlike. Victor barked curses, threats, and bargains. But the law had teeth. Harlan read charges in a flat judicial voice. Our cameras recorded every word, every flinch. The bait had worked. The spectacle belonged to us now. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the street, their faces pale lanterns in the mist. They saw Victor and his men dragged into cars, their arrogance drowned by handcuffs and rain. The untouchable made touchable. The predators turned spectacle. When it was over, Nathan collapsed onto the porch, mud streaking his knees, tears mixing with rain. I bent, picked the camera from the hydrangea, its lens fogged but still recording. Inside that little box was the truth. Undeniable, permanent, ours. The house exhaled when they were gone. The walls seemed straighter, the photographs on the mantel less fragile. Nathan slumped in a chair, too drained to speak. Harlan buttoned his coat, rain dripping from his hat brim. He looked at me with something rare. Respect, untainted by pity. "You planned this like a man who's tasted loss," he said, "and learned to turn patience into a weapon." I didn't correct him. Sometimes patience is a weapon. Sometimes it's the only one left. Nathan's hand trembled as he reached for mine. His grip was desperate, almost childlike. "I thought I could fix it alone," he whispered. "You were always part of the proof," I told him. "But proof isn't made by bets. It's built for life." Outside, the rain softened to a mist. The porch light hummed. For the first time since he'd left with that briefcase, Nathan sat beside me without flinching. Revenge is not always a hammer. Sometimes it's a key, turned quietly, opening a door the enemy never knew was locked. That night, the lock clicked. The storm broke. The spectacle turned. But this war was far from over. The money was still gone. The courtrooms still waited. And Victor's shadow. Shadows don't vanish overnight. The silence after their arrest was not peace. Not yet. It was the kind of silence that settles when a storm tears the roof off your home. The thunder is gone. The lightning has burned itself out, but the sky still drips its last rage. You stand there staring upward, knowing more rain will come. But the worst has already passed. Inside the kitchen, the world felt smaller, closer. Nathan sat hunched at the table, his hair plastered to his forehead, rainwater dripping down the bridge of his nose. His hands wrapped tight around a chipped mug of coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip. The steam curled upward, lost to the damp air. He clung to that cup, like it was the only warm thing left in his life. His anchor in a sea that had tried to swallow him whole. His eyes didn't meet mine. They stayed locked on the swirls in the wood grain, following paths that led nowhere. I moved slower than usual, every joint stiff and aching from the tension that had carried me through the night. My bones felt older than my years, and yet my spirit hummed, raw from the storm's passing. On the mantel, Margaret's photograph waited. Her smile, frozen in sunlight from a summer long gone, looked blurred by raindrops. I lifted the frame, wiped her face clean with my sleeve. My voice slipped out, no more than a whisper, the way a man speaks to the dead when he still needs them to listen. "We held the line tonight, Margaret. You'd be proud." The house smelled of damp wool, wet timber, and scorched coffee left too long on the burner. Every sound was magnified. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the fridge, the shuffle of Nathan's restless fingers against the mug. Far away, faint but distinct, a siren cut across the night. Somewhere downtown, Victor and his men were being booked, stripped of their swagger, turned into case files and docket numbers. My mind replayed the images like a film reel. Victor's sneer folding into desperation, the clink of handcuffs in the rain, the flash of the deputy's torch bouncing off slick pavement. I saw their empire of arrogance collapse in minutes. For the first time, I had seen fear in their eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of something larger, something they couldn't charm or threaten into silence. Then Nathan's voice broke the quiet, raw and trembling, as if it had clawed its way out of him. "Dad." He swallowed hard, his throat working. "Do you hate me?" The words sliced deeper than any crowbar, deeper than every insult Victor ever spat. Hatred, coming from my own son's lips, was a wound I wasn't sure I could bear. I pulled out the chair across from him, lowered myself slow, my knees groaning in protest. I folded my hands on the table, steadying my voice. "Hate you? No." I let the word hang heavy, so he would believe me. "I hate what you did. I hate the weakness that made you think running was easier than standing. But hate you? No, Nathan. You're my son." His shoulders shuddered, his face cracking open as the first sob tore through him. His knuckles whitened around the mug. "I ruined everything." He choked. "Mom's memory, your trust, the house. I don't deserve to sit here." I didn't rush to answer. Some truths need silence to breathe, to settle before you touch them. Finally, I leaned closer. "You're right," I said quietly. "You don't deserve it. But family isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we fight to protect. Tonight, you fought. Maybe late, maybe not enough. But you stood your ground when the storm came. That matters." His lips trembled. He pressed the mug to his chest like a shield. I was terrified, not just of them, of being nothing, of failing you, of becoming just another man who wasted every chance he was given. I studied him, and for the first time in years, I saw past the shame. Beneath the man bowed by greed and fear, I saw the boy I had once raised, the boy who had built crooked tree houses out back and raced home with skinned knees and a smile that could light a room. Life had buried him under arrogance, under mistakes. But tonight, the shell cracked. "You're not nothing," I told him, my voice low, firm. "But you came damn close to throwing yourself into that abyss." His eyes glistened. He nodded once, as if the words struck harder than any punishment could. Outside, the rain softened, the storm retreating into a drizzle that tapped gently against the windows. The house, battered, tested, scarred, seemed to breathe again. For the first time in a long while, its walls didn't feel like they were closing in. Later, after Nathan lay down on the couch, too ashamed to step into his old room upstairs, I stepped outside, onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath me, still slick with rain. I leaned against the railing, the rough wood biting into my palm. The air smelled of pine, wet earth, and something clean, washed fresh by the storm. The mountains stood like silent witnesses in the distance, their dark outlines rising against the ragged clouds. Somewhere far off an owl called, steady and soft, as if reminding me that the night was not empty. I tilted my head back, watching as stars began to break through the tatters of clouds. They were faint, fragile pinpricks, but they were there, proof that even after a storm, light found its way back. My thoughts drifted to legacy. People mistake it for property, for money, for names carved on plaques. But legacy is quieter than that. Legacy lives in marrow, in backbone, in the lessons a father leaves his son when the world tries to crush him. Victor had built an empire on fear, but fear crumbles in daylight. My legacy, I realized, was not this land or these crumbling walls. It wasn't a bank account or a deed. My legacy was the grit to stand when everything else was falling. And tonight, Perhaps Nathan had felt it for the first time. I whispered into the night, as if Margaret's spirit hovered close. Maybe he learned love. Maybe tonight he finally learned. The clouds parted wider, stars scattering like shy witnesses. The storm had passed, but the fight wasn't done. Courtrooms still waited, with their sharp suits and colder eyes. Papers had to be signed, evidence filed, lies unspooled in front of strangers who would judge us both. Victor's shadow would linger. Men like him didn't vanish. They recoiled, they regrouped, they waited. But for now, the house still stood. My son still breathed under my roof. And for the first time in years, hope, thin and fragile, stirred in my chest, like the flicker of a flame. Yet even as I breathed it in, I knew peace was not ours yet. Not while the money remained missing. Not while enemies whispered in corners. Not while the law still weighed its scales. The storm had broken, yes, but another was already gathering, just beyond the mountains, and I would have to face it. Morning arrived softer than I ever expected. After nights of thunder and fear, the dawn crept in like a gentle hand across a scarred face. The storm clouds had torn themselves apart, leaving only clear sky stretched wide above the mountains. The air carried the sharp scent of pine needles, damp soil, and wood washed clean by rain. Sunlight spilled over the peaks in golden sheets, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest loosened. The world no longer felt like it was collapsing. I brewed coffee the way Margaret used to, taking my time. She always said a man could be judged by the patience he had with the little things. I let the grounds bloom, listened to the quiet gurgle of the pot, and watched steam curl into the kitchen air. The house, worn and scarred as it was, felt alive again. Nathan shuffled in, dragging his feet like a boy too tired after a long game. His hair stuck out in every direction, his eyes swollen from a restless night on the couch. But in the clean light of morning, stripped of the shadows and bravado, he looked younger, more like the son I had raised than the stranger who once betrayed me. "Smells good," he muttered, voice rough. I poured a cup and slid it across the table to him. "Better than the sludge you used to sneak into your thermos before school." For the first time in what felt like years, he laughed. It was small, broken at the edges, but real, and real was enough. We sat in silence for a long time, each sip filling the hollow spaces the night had carved into us. The only sounds were the steady tick of the wall clock and the soft groan of floorboards adjusting as the house warmed in the morning light. Outside, I could hear the faint stirrings of town life. Distant car engines, a dog barking, a delivery truck rumbling down the main road. The world moved on, oblivious to the war that had been fought on this porch. Nathan set his mug down carefully, his eyes fixed on his hands. His fingers trembled, whether from exhaustion or from the weight of his words. I couldn't tell. "I don't know how to make this right, Dad," he said at last, his voice low, stripped of its arrogance. "I can't give the money back. I can't undo what I did." The chair creaked as I leaned back, letting the weight of his confession settle between us. His words were true. Some wounds don't stitch back together. Some mistakes can't be erased, but scars can still teach. "You're right," I said evenly. "You can't undo it. Some things you don't fix, you carry. You carry the shame. You carry the lesson. You carry the scars, but you don't carry them alone. Not if you stand tall and choose to do better." He swallowed, his throat tight. "I want to try. I want to earn back your trust." I looked across the table, and for the first time in years, I truly saw him. The arrogance was gone, burned away by consequence. What remained wasn't a boy, nor quite yet the man I hoped he'd be, but something in between. Someone broken, yes, but broken into shape rather than shattered. Then start by staying, I told him. Stay here. Help me rebuild this place, not just the walls. They'll hold. Help me rebuild us. His lips trembled. Tears welled again, and this time he didn't fight them. He reached across the table, hesitating for a heartbeat before taking my hand. His grip was firm, and for the first time since Margaret passed, I felt his touch carry no greed, no guilt, only sincerity, only love. The days that followed unfolded like a slow dawn. Court hearings came and went. Victor and his men rotted in county jail, their empire of fear collapsing under the paper trail Harlan uncovered. Harlan's updates became the drumbeat of justice. Assets seized, accomplices turned, power stripped away piece by piece. Each report carried a faint note of pride in his otherwise dry tone, as if to remind me that even the law still had sharp teeth when wielded right. Neighbors began to stop by again. At first, their visits were cautious, curious glances, hushed questions about the flashing squad cars and the headlines that filled the papers. But soon they came warmer, bringing casseroles, offering hands to lift and mend. One headline stuck with me. Callahan stands against crime syndicate. I didn't care for the spotlight, but I knew what it meant. Victor's shadow had lifted. His reign had broken. Meanwhile, Nathan stayed. Each day he rose with the sun, his boots crunching across the yard before the dew had dried. He cleared branches, mended the sagging fence, scrubbed the soot from the fireplace, oiled the creaking barn hinges. Every nail he hammered was more than labor. It was penance. Every time he worked beside me without complaint, I glimpsed the boy Margaret believed in. One evening, as the sky bled orange and purple across the ridges, we sat side by side on the porch. The crickets had begun their chorus, the air cooling with the promise of night. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady, almost searching. "Dad," he said softly, "I used to think money was the only way to prove myself. $15 million. I thought it would make me untouchable. But I see now. The only thing that mattered was here, with you, with Mom's memory. With the life you built?" I nodded slowly, the truth of his words echoing in my chest. "Money burns. Legacy lasts." He sat with that for a long time. Then his voice broke into a whisper. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the familiar curve of a locket. Margaret's locket. She had left it behind for him, her words clear. "Give it to Nathan when he's ready." I pressed it into his palm. "She didn't give up on you either," I told him. "This was hers. Now it's yours. Carry it better than you carried the money." He closed his hand around it, his eyes shining as tears caught the last light of day. His voice shook, but it held conviction. "I will, Dad. I promise." The crickets sang louder. The mountains stood like old guardians, their peaks painted with fire by the dying sun. The air grew cooler, softer.
Nathan sat beside me, Margaret's locket pressed tight in his fist.
And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Peace. Legacy was never about houses, accounts, or deeds signed in ink. Legacy was in the marrow, in the courage passed from father to son, in the resilience that teaches a man to bend but never break. Legacy was forgiveness, hard-earned and freely given. As the last light faded from the Colorado sky, I knew Margaret could finally rest. Our son had found his way home, and so, in a house that had weathered storms and betrayals, forgiveness sat at the table once more.